Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carmen Yetzi-Mazera, and I serve as Executive Director of APSIA, the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs. Welcome to day 3 of our Diversity Forum series of workshops for advisors. Oh, everybody's already jazzed, I love it. So as many of you have already heard, since you've been able to join us for other sessions this week, the Diversity Forum itself really is about inspiring and supporting your students, especially those that are underrepresented in international affairs, to join us here in the fields. And we in particular know the special role that you play and want to support you in your responsibilities and your efforts to bring these many tremendous opportunities to them on campus. I particularly want to thank everyone who makes this event possible, especially my team, Melina Perez and Brianna Suarez. I want to thank all of the investors who make this event possible, and in a special way to thank the Harvard Kennedy School, Johns Hopkins SAIS, McLarty Associates, Open Society Foundations, Princeton University's School of Public and International Affairs, the Maxwell School at Syracuse, the Bush School at Texas A&M, the USC Master of Public Diplomacy program, and the University of Washington Jackson School, who've made in particular special contributions to make these events possible for you. I hope you will be able to join us for the rest of this week. And I'm going to ask my colleague to throw a link to the program into the chat, which she has already done. And in a particular way, I want to flag for you the event on Friday, where my colleague Brianna and I will talk a little bit more about what APSIA is, and in particular, how we can be of service to you going forward. We really see this week as just the beginning of our relationship. A recording of this session will be available on the APSIA YouTube page following this. And so if you need to revisit anything, or you just like looking at Oliver's lovely face, you're welcome to do that at any time. So with that, I'm very pleased to turn the floor over to Vicki DeFrancesco Soto to kick us off. Vicki, please.
Thanks so much, Carmen, and thank you all for joining us today, the tail end of the semester. I know that we're all catching our breath. It's been not just quite a semester, but quite a year. But nevertheless, I think that now more than ever, public affairs, public policy is of interest because it really helps us understand how the world around us, how the policies affect our day-to-day in science, in politics. Whatever it is, I can probably figure out the public policy dimension to it. So I'm just laying out my bias upfront, how important I think graduate education in these fields are. And I am thrilled to be joined by public affairs professionals who work at some of our top schools in the nation to talk about the graduate school experience, as well as the nuts and bolts of what it takes to apply, that process for applying, and also understanding a little bit of the day-to-day for the students once they're in there. So what I want to do is I want to start off with the basics, right? Let's just lay it out. It may seem obvious, but why? Why go to graduate school in public affairs, public policy, international relations? The law schools, the medical schools, no brainers. Okay, if you want to be a surgeon, you got to go to medical school. But if you're interested in policy, why go to one of our institutions? So I think I'm going to ask Oliver to kick us off.
Thank you. And again, welcome everyone. So great to see you all. So I will try to be as concise as possible. This is a common question. Of course, we frequently get, and we get it often because we have a number of programs that require people to kind of track themselves or select. So how I think about international affairs, public policy, public administration, public affairs is, as Vicki kind of mentioned, every single aspect of everyone's daily life is governed by these areas. And what better way to understand the complexities and understand and gain the multidisciplinary perspective in order to address some of the problems that are grappling our world that keep us from having the most just and equitable society that we possibly can. And so I think that is the main difference for me about what kind of drives me, and I think drives our students, is that many of the other professional fields and degrees are unidimensional. And so they have a particular focus that may be on law, maybe on business. But what field is more multidisciplinary than understanding the intersection of lots of different areas that govern our lives and lots of different ways in which we can try to address those problems using skills, knowledge, and experiences that all of our students, our faculty, and staff have gained in order to increase all of the opportunities that are available to improve society and so that everyone can live a just, free, and healthy life.
Thanks, Oliver. And Sherlonda, let me go to you in terms of when you're interacting with students, with either prospective students or students already at the Humphrey School at the University of Minnesota, why did they come to seek out these degrees? You know, what are the paths that led these students to the Humphrey School?
Wonderful, thank you. And again, I also want to have greetings to everyone. I will start with prospective students and with the students that you all might be working with all of the time. What I tell students in the recruitment process is there's truly only two reasons to go to graduate school. And that is either because it meets a personal goal that you have for yourself, it's something that you want to attain, or it meets a professional goal. So when you think about not just necessarily the first job or the second job that you are going to have, but the corner office job, the big job, of having students explore what kind of background do those folks have? What kind of paths have they taken? And is this degree, is this knowledge, is this network that you're going to build going to be an asset for you? And more than likely, it's going to be yes, depending on what they're looking at. But I'm very clear with students that graduate school is an experience where you need to be very focused on the outcomes so that it's too much time. Even though it might be a year or two, this is a very precious time in life for most of our students, if they're in the 20s and they're just starting out their careers, if they are older students who are looking to do a career change, all time is precious. So it's too much time to just sort of maybe be into it because I'm interested. It is really because I am looking to do something specific. I am looking to gain an expertise. I am looking to make sure that I have the skill set needed to do the things that I would like to do in this world. So that's the first piece that I would tell students, does it fit one of those two criteria? For the current students who are at the Humphrey School I know it may sound granular, but they really do want to change the world. They see the world as it is, and they see what the possibilities are, and they want to be a part of that change. At the Humphrey School, we say we are here to advance the common good. And so many of them want to dig in and do that work to talk about not just finding out about health disparities, but how do we eliminate them through policy? How do we make measures in K through 12 education so that we have better outcomes for marginalized communities? And so they are really there to get the information that they need to have the type of impact that they want in the world. And so when I am interacting with these future possible governors and state leaders and corporate 500 CEOs and presidents of NGOs and all of this that they're going to be doing in the future, it is super exciting, but they are driven to solve the grand challenges of the world.
And Sherlonda, I love how you stated that, the grand challenges. And, you know, when I'm asked to describe a typical, LBJ student, I go, they are impatient change makers, right? And I think that regardless of whether that's change in K through 12 education policy or health policy or immigration, it's that common denominator of change maker. And I would just underscore what Oliver was saying earlier, which is our degree programs, and there are some differences, right, from school to school. Like at the LBJ school, we have a Master's of Public Affairs and a Master's of Global Policy Studies. Others have Public Administration, International Affairs, but it's all kind of that same change maker toolkit that can be applied to everything. So if you're talking to students who are majoring in engineering, there is a very powerful public policy dimension to engineering. Or if you're dealing with students who are in the humanities or in the arts, I think that what's so important, and I ask those of you joining us today, is to keep in mind that a public policy, public affairs degree complements all of that, and also remind your students that it can also complement other professional degrees, such as medical degrees, law degrees. So it shouldn't be viewed as just, you know, kind of a standalone option, but one that can be combined with many things. And as we've kind of defined what a public policy degree is in its totality, I want to go to Michal from Harvard and ask you to talk to us about what programs are looking for. You know, when we get those, you know, gazillion application forms, what makes a prospective student stand out, and what are kind of some general rules of thumb for these prospective applicants to keep in mind?
Yeah, thank you, Victoria. I actually work at the Graduate Institute, which is located in Geneva in Switzerland. So we're the international school, and I apologize for looking like a ghost. I've got a sunset coming through my window through some trees, and the light keeps moving around. So I've got my Zoom light, and then I'm overexposed. I'm sorry about that. I'll switch it back on in a minute. So we're a little bit different, I think, from a lot of schools, a lot of our peers in the APSIA group, because we are one of those schools that actually does not require students to have work experience when they come. So Oliver and Sherlonda, you'll confirm, and maybe Melina, you'll confirm this for me, but I believe that a lot of your programs do require some substantial work experience from applicants. I don't know if that's a nod or a no, but that is always our impression working with you guys. And we do not. So we do have some students always who come to us directly from an undergrad degree. And that's okay. If they have work experience, that's even better. You know, that's very much appreciated too, but it's not, strictly speaking, a requirement. So what do we look for? We're looking for something a little bit intangible. We are looking for the student who is able to look at things from a different point of view, and also, like Oliver said before, from a multitude of points of view, right? If this is not a unilateral, there we go again, monochrome degree. This is one of those fields of studies that it doesn't matter how you look at it, it's going to be transdisciplinary or inter or intra or multidisciplinary. And we really are looking for the student who can show some evidence that they were able to question stuff. Maybe their question was as simple as, why isn't that theory on the reading list for this course? You know, I want to go there. That's what that's what I want to explore. I want to get off the beaten path in terms of what I'm reading. Or, you know, it may be that they did a travel experience and now they're questioning, you know, the common accepted doctrine about the way that some world events came about. Or maybe they just had a bar job in the summer and talked to somebody, but we're able to take that conversation and somehow shift their point of view of something fundamental. It's those kinds of students who are able to show us that they have that ability to, you know, look at things from the less, you know, the less beaten path. And every student will have a very different way of demonstrating that. Like I said, not everybody has access to a study abroad experience. Not everybody has access to, you know, go and work for Habitat for Humanity, you know, in a developing country over a summer every year. But everybody has the ability to do something in terms of their studies and their experience to express that curiosity. And, you know, we talk a lot about critical thinking, and this is how it really comes into light for us. So I think that's a kind of, like I said, it's a slightly intangible quality, but we'll see it come through from the student's resume in terms of their experience, but particularly in the writing, in, you know, in their cover letter or their personal statement. And we are looking for very good writers. That's an important skill for graduate school that they need to have already, pat down. And you know, so we'll be looking for how well they're expressing that. Now, again, another thing that makes us a little bit different from the rest of you is that 85% of our students are actually international. Only 15% of them are from the country where we're located, which is Switzerland. So we really truly are looking at, you know, a massively non-English speaking and international student body, and they all have to demonstrate sufficient English to be very skilled writers, right? So we're already looking at students who have you know, that kind of skill. We're looking for good students. We're looking for strong students. You know, like you can't remember who said it, but you know, we come to graduate school, you're focused. We're not sending you to a variety of disciplines anymore to get your general education. You know, we want you to start to really you know, focus on the area of studies. And that does require the ability to read a lot of stuff, to read a lot of books. Some of them aren't all that accessible in the way that they were written, to read them quickly, to understand and comprehend and analyze them, and be able to use that knowledge to build something new and to develop a different point of view. The last thing I would say about those different points of view, it doesn't matter which of our degrees, which of our disciplines you do, all of them have that, like I said, that transdisciplinary character to them. So even if you're looking at something, you know, if you're a historian, you know, studying international political history, or if you're a scholar of international law, inevitably, when you come to look at some, you know, events that are happening locally or in the world, you're always going to be tying in, how did this event get influenced by the politics and by the geography? Are people fighting over water? You know, is that at the heart of this conflict? How has the history evolved? What are the cultural implications? Is that what people are fighting over? Maybe it's something like values or religion. So, you know, what are the economic implications, and how is that impacting them? So it's, again, that ability to hold up different and sometimes even conflicting points of view all at the same time. And that requires a little bit of maturity, personal maturity, and academic maturity as well.
Thanks, Michal. And my apologies for
No
the
problem.
wrong institutional affiliation. And before I forget, I want to invite you all to submit any questions or thoughts or comments into the chat. In about 15-20 minutes, I'll open it up to where you can ask a question yourself. Just, you know, we're a small enough group where we can do that. But I also want to invite you to use the chat as well. And I want to dig further in to what institutions are looking like, and ask Oliver and Sherlonda to talk a little bit about what each of your institutions are looking for in the ideal candidate. Let's see. Sherlonda, we'll start with you, and then we'll circle back to Oliver.
All right, thank you so much for what we are looking for. And I think this is going to be good advice to your students, is to have them do a bit of research into the places that they're interested in, and even finding out how many applicants are interested in that particular institution, because it's going to vary quite widely from place to place. And I say that to say there are certainly places that are so overwhelmed with applicants that really part of their process, unfortunately, is elimination. Like they get so many applicants and there's only so much room that it is finding out, okay, who doesn't meet these types of things. For the Humphrey School in particular, we are very clear with students that we don't have cutoffs. That's just not the business that we're into, because we truly, when we say we look at applicants holistically, we are very real about that. And we also, as a school, have the capacity to grow some of our programs, and some of our programs are very tight. It's 15 students, and that's what we can have. And so just based on the number of faculty, the number of advisors, things like that. So it's going to vary, but that'll be important information for students to know just about what are my opportunities here? What are my chances for admission? What we look for in students, and as I've said this before, and Michal did a great job at talking about this, is a level, of course, I would call it, all of us are looking for the usual suspects. The usual suspects would be a good academic track record, or reasoning around what happened there. We are looking for, if for those of us who have work experience requirements or internship requirements, but things that folks have done related to or within the field, looking for that, looking at those references, and specifically sometimes the closer they are to their undergraduate experience, of looking at what those academic references say about their ability to be successful in a rigorous graduate school program, looking for the coursework that they've done. So I call those the usual suspects. I think the other things that we look for is a level of maturity. For me, it's very important to work with students. And one of the things I do from a coaching aspect is I really work with students around shedding the undergraduate mindset, which again, Michal spoke to very perfectly. What I tell students is graduate school is about gaining an expertise. And so, with undergrad, I liken it to a restaurant where it's like undergrad is like the buffet. And you go in and there's a carving station and there's a seafood section and there's salads and desserts galore. And I was like, when you go for a master's degree, it's like the fancy Italian restaurant with 10 things on the menu. And that is all. Like, you don't go there to get sushi. You are going there to get that particular thing, because sometimes students, depending on where they are in the process, well, I'm interested in this and I'm interested in this, and can I get this and can I do these things as well? And I'll say absolutely, but also how long do you want to be here? Because we have a limited amount, is a limited amount of time, you have a limited amount of credits. And so you might get 3 classes where you can do some outside things to have a specialty, but this is not where, undergrad, where you have 2 majors and 2 minors and you took some more classes over here. It just doesn't work that way. And so I look for people who are at that maturity level where they understand, I want to study science, technology, and environmental policy. And I specifically want to do things around carbon emissions, where they're there. And we know, okay, you are ready for this level of experience. So looking for maturity, looking for a person who really is at the point of deciding fit for themselves, so that they have they've done the research around, and we know that students are at different levels. So some of it is for folks in your position of helping students really set up, what is my path to graduate school? First, decide, is this something I want? Second, what are the majors that are options for me? Third, where might I want to be? And really the folks who've done the research around what is that particular institution really fantastic at? And does that align with the goals that I have? Like for us, we are a wonderful school, but I know if someone's looking for cybersecurity, I am going to reference them to some more of my colleagues, because there are other places where they could get that. And so, but I love it even more when students know, you're not really a cybersecurity place, but you all do housing and equity around housing and urban planning exceptionally well. And it's like, yes, we do. So if you want to talk about the impact of transportation or gentrification on marginalized communities, the Humphrey is a great place for you. Let's talk more about that. So looking for the usual suspects, looking for that level of maturity that signals that they are ready for the rigor and the expectations of a graduate school experience.
I love the buffet analogy, and I'm going to use it because you're absolutely right. It's a cuisine, right? That you're getting when you come to graduate school. It's that difference. And Oliver, can you tell me a little bit about what your institution is looking for in particular? And then I'm gonna pipe up too and tell you a little bit about what we do over here at the LBJ School.
Sure, great. So I'll say that for Harvard Kennedy School, we might be a little bit different. And so I'll kind of tell you a little bit about why that is. So I'll say, do not kind of try to be prescriptive in our application review process. We, similar to what Sherlonda kind of mentioned, employ holistic reviews. And so we don't try to prescribe about saying that there's an ideal candidate or a candidate that we are seeking in our application process. Part of that is because we have 22 partner schools that we have as combined degree programs between business, law, the Institute, Graduate Institute in Geneva. And so we value those partnerships. In addition to that, we have an open registration process where our students can take courses across any of the Harvard schools. And so because of that multidisciplinary perspective that we feel like we bring and that we want our applicants to bring, we don't require kind of the specialization. And we actually do value applicants who, again, not are looking for a generalist degree in the same way as an undergraduate degree may be, but those who might see the intersection of lots of different areas of policy or lots of different areas of international affairs, and they may want to explore them before they end up deciding what their particular focus may be. And so we've both designed our curriculum. Our curriculum, particularly in the Master in Public Policy program, is more prescriptive only in the first year, but the second year is pretty much all electives. And so each of our programs is slightly different, and that's why we try not to be too prescriptive. You'll find that we also don't publish. This is one of the reasons we also don't publish many of our statistics on our website about acceptance rates, about GRE scores and all of that, because we don't want to discourage or dissuade applicants who believe that a public policy, a public administration, and international affairs degree might be a good fit for them. We want them to explore our curriculum, to explore the opportunities available before they decide whether or not they think it's a good fit. But there's 4 criteria that we use to evaluate. And what I try to encourage applicants to see is to see the application as their mechanism and vehicle for communicating their life story to us and where they think they want to head. I think sometimes one of the dangers that happens is when applicants view the application as a checklist of items that they have to submit in order to see whether or not they will get in. And instead, I think that part of the great process of applying to graduate school, and I really do think it is a process, is one of self-discovery, where they may find out things about themselves, where they may find out things that others who are writing recommendations and others who are commenting on them that they never knew about themselves. And it provides them a chance to reflect on what they want in the next phase of their life, how graduate school fits into accomplishing that in their personal and professional lives, and then how they can articulate their story, the contributions that they will bring, and they have an opportunity to do so in a lot of different mechanisms. And so instead of viewing the essays, right, as I need to craft the perfect essay, I always say, you are supposed to craft your story, your authentic story, and present that story to an admissions committee. And the evaluation of that is not in any way a denigration of your story. It is not a devaluing of it or a lifting up. It simply means that your story resonated in some fashion with our admissions committee, and that we believe that you might be a good fit for us. So the 4 areas that we are looking at are academic accomplishment. So similar to what my colleagues have mentioned, we all are looking for strong students. The second area is contributions to leadership. And so because we don't formally require work experience for all of our programs, some of our programs do require work experience, but most of our applicants, the vast majority of our applicants, successful applicants do have work experience. We want them to have demonstrated they have the ability to exercise leadership, right? That they don't need to be the person in the front of the parade, but they need to understand when they can exercise their own leadership and positionality and wherever they are in order to be a change maker and accomplish changes, kind of as Vicky has mentioned. The third area is contributions, is their ability to demonstrate a commitment to public service. So that one is very important, that we want to ensure that people are committed to public service and that this is not a degree that they're viewing as an MBA light, as a JD light, that it really is they are committed to being change makers and to doing good in the world, and that they have done that throughout their life experiences. And then the last one is about contributing to a diverse learning environment. And so that is their life experiences, everything that they bring. And so those are the 4 areas and the 4 dimensions that we are evaluating applicants on in our application process.
Thank you, Oliver. And I'll just add a little bit, rather than add, I guess underscore what you and Sherlonda said, where there is no magic formula that we plug and chug into looking at students. But, you know, I'm going to grab on to this idea of maturity, right? Because you could have a student who finished up undergrad in 3 years and is 20 years old, but is super duper mature and is a great fit for a graduate program. And other times you don't. And, you know, so I think that in guiding your students about what to do is really thinking through that maturity quotient. And a lot of times maturity, for most of us, myself included, came with time, came with experience. So for, you know, the rest of us who are not that exception, is encouraging your students who are interested in public policy to look at, you know, opportunities before entering a public policy program. Because again, just speaking from the LBJ school, we tend to see that the more competitive students, the students who not only have a greater likelihood of being admitted, but also a greater likelihood of getting funding, which is just as important, tend to be those who have been out of school, bring in those experiences, a richness that time and you know, lived experiences bring. And on that pivot point of money, you know, how do we fund our education? This is where the conversation turns to the brass tacks. You know, it is an investment. I would argue that there is a very rich return on that investment, but it is an investment nevertheless, and especially for some of our students who may be first-generation college students, students of color, it is a big decision. So for you to be able to walk through your students about that process, I think is going to make it a lot less scary, and also how to figure out that plan. So Michal, let me start with you in terms of how the funding for your program works.
Yeah, that's such an important aspect, right? That's the make or break. So our American students who are eligible for loans can use those. We are a recognized, accredited partner, whatever the term is, for US loans. And I do have a colleague who specializes in that. So I would refer students directly to her to see how to do that. We also have some of our own packages for financial aid. And like in many other places, some of that aid will come in the form of tuition remission, and some of it will come as a cost of living scholarship, which can cover either half or full cost of living in Geneva, Switzerland. So the bad news for us, I guess, is that there's no I can't give you the formula of, you know, who will get the aid. Our aid is primarily need-based, especially for master degree students. And in fact, it's all need-based first, and then competitive based on academic achievement. You know, the bad news is that we don't have enough to go around for everyone. I don't think anybody does. That would be nice. The good news is that we're not actually all as expensive as you would expect from one of the most expensive cities in the world, apparently. Our tuition is only $8,000 per year. $4,000 per semester. We are a 2-year program, so that's ×2. But by comparison to some of our colleagues in the US, at least I know that that is not necessarily a very high bill. And the cost of living in Geneva, and this really surprised me when I heard some of the comparisons, because we always thought, you know, in Switzerland, Geneva is like one of the most expensive cities, one of two. The cost of living in Geneva is estimated at about $20,000 to $24,000 per year. So that's the cost that you're looking at. So a full scholarship from us would amount to $20,000 per year, $2,000 per month, and a half scholarship would be, half of that would be $10,000. So that's the way that the aid works. And then again, like I said, because the majority of our students come from all over the world, where they're always asking, where can I go for financial aid? So every country will have its own, government or public funding, and then it's private foundations. Different countries have more or less difficulty in providing like bank loans, private consumer loans to students to fund their education. So it's going to be a very different situation depending on where they come from. But from the US, they can qualify for US loans.
Great, thank you. Sherlonda and Oliver, if you guys will do a mini round robin here in terms of funding sources and the process to attain those funding sources.
Yes, so for us, we actually, the rankings for merit-based, so we have a merit-based process, which I think it might be a universal thing, but I won't speak for everyone, in that we, unlike undergrad, where they might get a package with loans and all of those things involved, with us at University of Minnesota, we have, at Humphrey School, we have a mix of scholarships. Some of them are endowed, and that's the thing to let students know about. So some of them are endowed, so they are specific to a certain thing. So a family has given money and they want that to fund the education of someone who is from a rural background, for example, just as an example. And so we make sure, in the spirit of wanting to make sure we make our funders happy, find someone who fits that criteria that they have. But outside of that, we try to fund, of course, as many students as possible. All of our funding goes towards tuition. At this point, there are a host of assistantships available to students. They can be quite competitive. And what we tell our students, and I know one of the questions later on is about location. One of the great things about our location being in Minneapolis and St. Paul, thus the Twin Cities, is our school has a reputation for having very strong students. So many of our students are able to get gainful employment part-time while they're students, while they are working, while they are in school. So they have this opportunity to get a professional experience, to grow their professional network, of course, get paid. So they're able to, have some bills taken care of. Right now, we are between 40 to 45% of our students get some level of funding, from a fourth of tuition all the way to full tuition. It varies, of course. And like Michal said, we would love for that to be more. But I also believe that our cost of attendance, at least not as good as Michal's. I'm like, wow, I need to go there. I'm going to Switzerland. But so it's not that competitive, but it is competitive in comparison to some of our sister and brother schools.
I want to go to Switzerland too, just putting that out there. But okay, Oliver, on that, get us off of this tangent, please, of wanting to go and hang out in Switzerland.
No, I'm already going, but see, we have a partnership, so that's what we already talked about. That I will be making once we get through the pandemic. We'll be on a flight. So this is, I think, for many of our applicants, I'll say, is one of the most challenging aspects. Our application process, the Kennedy School's application process, is one thing. We think it's relatively straightforward, but our funding is relatively complicated. And I think in general, graduate school, masters at least, PhD, right, funding is more straightforward, right? Pretty much everyone's fully funded. But for master's degrees, there's so many more levers that need to be pulled. So all of that is a preface to say that I can give you a brief explanation, but ours is very nuanced and complicated. The long and short is that we encourage any of our applicants not to think that they will automatically receive funding if they are admitted. That many of our applicants, our successful applicants, do end up needing to have some degree of borrowing, which I know is unexpected for them. Based on our endowment, everyone thinks that our endowment, right, would go to be able to provide all kinds of sorts of funding. So we provide funding, and we're transparent about this. We provide funding to about 30 to 35% of our admitted applicants. And so the vast majority of our applicants do not receive any funding from, and that's both from the Kennedy School specifically and then from Harvard. And so we have lots of different arrangements and agreements with some of our other Harvard schools, with the Central Harvard Endowment. And so we ask applicants not to worry about any of that, where it's coming from, because we have one single application for financial assistance. So they don't have to go and submit all these different applications. They submit one individual application. They then are considered, and they can kind of indicate any of the things they want to be considered for, and then we consider them. And some of our processes involve an interview, and those are typically the ones where they're receiving a fellowship that has programming and kind of all the bells and whistles. And then some of our funding is only money that is provided to offset either tuition or the living expenses. We are also in a pretty expensive place to live. And so our general cost of attendance is relatively high in comparison to some others because of how expensive it is, but we believe it's a good investment. And as long as people approach the process, understanding it might require some own kind of financial giving that they are doing, as well as potential loan borrowing to make it worthwhile, which we know is a hard pill to take because of their commitment to public service. So the upside that I'll end with is that there are many arrangements, such as the federal public loan forgiveness programs. We have a public service loan forgiveness program that we will actually make the payment. So the forgiveness program that's by the federal government, you're probably familiar with, you have to spend a certain amount of time. We have a program where we actually make the loan payments on behalf of the student if they graduate and they are earning below a certain amount. So we do have opportunities, even if they do have to incur some debt, that we will actually kind of take on that debt as long as they are fulfilling their obligation to commit to public service.
Thanks so much, Oliver. So we have one question that I wanted to get to, and then I know we do want to talk a little bit more on my list of things to get to, but I want to flag Mary's question from Ohio Northern University, which is a very good question. You know, what if the applicant's story, personal story, doesn't intersect with their desired area of academic study and professional career? So how does that fit in terms of as they're applying? So I'll make this a jump ball. Anyone want to grab this one? If not, I'm going to start calling.
So I'll start quickly, since I mentioned kind of this storytelling is, this is an area that I would suggest, usually the way that I'll say for the Kennedy School in the application process, we call it the pivot. And what they do is they've maybe done, which I'm guessing is perhaps what is being referenced here, they were a consultant for 10 years. And now all of a sudden, you know, they've got a story that says, but now I'm committed to public service, I'm committed to international affairs, and so now I'm going to do this, and your degree and this experience will help me then enter that. So we do take a lot of care in really trying to put together all the pieces to ensure that that's not just the story they're telling us that they think we want to hear. And so that's why we use the term demonstrated commitment to public service. So it doesn't necessarily mean, and that they need to have worked on the Hill, or that they need to have been a foreign service officer, right? Or that they need to have actually done kind of quote unquote government work. But what it does mean is there needs to be something in their background, something that they have actually done that shows that this is what they believe their calling to be, that this is more than a fad, that this is really a commitment that they are making in order to make the world a better place, in order to improve the lives of others. And that's ultimately, I'll say, what the Kennedy School is looking for. Are they committed to improving the lives of others? And that this degree, this occupation is not for self-gain, and that is not the primary reason that they are coming to our school.
Thanks, Oliver. So, you know, Sherlonda, did you want to jump in?
I just wanted to thank you, Mary, for that question. I wanted to, because I had a couple of interpretations of what you were asking. I think the student would need to be very clear about the fact that they are looking to pivot and what they've done to prepare to do that. I say that to say that at our school, we do have, because we have multiple degree programs, we do sometimes happen upon students who, based on their experience and even what they're expressing in their essay, it seems like they would be a better fit for X program. And I know it can be nuanced and hard to suss out certain things. However, we have taken the time to sometimes say to a student, are you certain? Because we want to make sure like their academics are good, things are good, but we're actually at the point of thinking about fit for the program. And so we want to make sure that the student understands, based on what the program you've applied for, you're not going to be getting these things that you are talking about being passionate about. And we want to do some follow-up around that. But that is something that we definitely can't guarantee that everyone would have the time to do or would even do. So I say that to say it could lead to a denial if the student isn't clear about what Oliver was saying about the pivot and about what they're doing now and about the future plans, because students can sometimes not be as clear as they need to be. In that writing section, any time that they have the opportunity to write about themselves and about their goals is so important, because that's the part of them that comes alive for us. Like your transcripts are what they are. For scores, they are what they are. They're a measurement, but the humanization part of an applicant really comes in those essays. And so the fact that they need to be written very well is important. And I think you're bringing up a good point there of, I guess my question would be, why isn't it matching? Because it sort of should be. So, what's happening there? That's if I'm interpreting your question correctly.
So, I think this question and the responses from Oliver and Sherlonda just really emphasize the power of the personal statement. Yes, scores matters, and yes, GPA matters, and letters of rec matter, but the personal statement, at least in my case, when I've been on the admissions committee, this is something where you want to see that story, to Oliver's point, but it's also that opportunity to explain things that just from the CV or the application or the resume don't seem to fit. And you can be like, oh, well, this is why I went off this track. Let me explain why. And it might be able to really bring light upon why a student has decided a certain track. What I want to do is stick with the nuts and bolts before we wrap up. And again, please, any questions, drop them in the chat, raise your hand. Also, you'll have a bunch of resources that Carmen has dropped in the chat in terms of loan forgiveness, tips for recommendation letters. You can find more information on the programs, and shameless plug for mine too, Carmen, you left me out. The LBJ school down here in the heart of Texas. I know all of our programs also have, you can contact us, but you can also look at different orientations. And now in the age of webinars, it has become easier. That's kind of one of the silver linings. I know that I'm working together with my arch nemesis over at Texas A&M, and we're doing a pipeline program to recruit students and focus on students of color. And we're going to be having some of those things available online that students from wherever in the world and the country can sign up for. So if you have a student that's interested in one of our programs, have them check out our website, because more likely than not, they're going to find some dates for webinars and even in-person things that they can get to. So, okay, I want to talk about the calendar, usually how it works. So if you have a student who's decided, I want to get a graduate degree in public policy, public affairs, international affairs, how does the calendar work? When do I need to start putting stuff together? When should I apply? So Sherlonda, let me stay with you, and then I'll go over to Michal to tell us if there's any differences from the international calendar of events.
So with deadlines, I think it's important just for students to be aware and make their own sort of matrix, however they might work, whatever works for them, but of being in mind for deadlines, especially because I know for us and for other places, deadlines can easily be connected to scholarship opportunities. So if there is a January 1st deadline, that could be for early consideration and could be for scholarship priority versus if they were to wait for an April 1st deadline, as an example. So that's one thing, of course, to pay attention, and then for themselves to think through what is their own personal timeline. I always tell students I would start with the references. And I say this because, at least for our school, and I think this is true for other places, that is the portion of your application that you have very little control over. Because once you have identified your people, for us, our candidates will put in their references information, and that generates an email that comes from the university. So it's not something where the student uploads letters of reference or something like that. So because of that, I've told students, make sure you have those folks ready to go and have some backups ready to go, because we have a December 15th deadline. The number of people calling us in tears on December 15th because their application says not completed, it's almost always because one of those references is missing. And then they're going, oh my goodness, because they can get their transcripts and upload, they get their test scores, their essays, all of that is kind of under their domain. But the references piece is, you're relying on other people. And if that person, a lot of people really like academic superstars or superstar employers, and those folks tend to be busy. So if you are getting a reference from the governor, but the governor is in Beijing for 3 weeks, you might be in a little bit of trouble. And so you might want to make sure that you have some backups that are there. But I would say to be very deadline driven, to have had the time to do your research, because to me, by the time you're applying, you've made a decision that this is right for you. It's not, I'm going to spend this time and this energy to see what happens. It's more of, this is a place that I could see myself committing to. And so I'm going to go through this process in the hopes that I will have options after I learn my fate. So those are some of my first thoughts around just being deadline driven.
Great. Thanks, Sherlonda. Michal?
Yeah, I don't have very much to add. We have exactly the same process for the referees, for the recommendations, except we give them 7 extra days beyond the deadline to get theirs in. So that if somebody applies like right 5 minutes before the deadline, before midnight on that day, it would be a little unfair for that email to then reach the referee. So we give them 7 more days for the references to actually come in. But of course, 7 days may very well not be sufficient for the governor who is in Beijing working from a different time zone to boot. So yes, that if I had one word of advice, it would be exactly the same as you, Sherlonda. Get those references ready way ahead of time and work backwards from your deadline. Our deadline is 15th of January. We have an early bird deadline on the 15th of November for our disciplinary programs, not the interdisciplinary ones. And we also have a late application deadline, which is the 1st of March. I'm loath to even mention it because it's not a good deadline. You can't apply for financial aid anymore. So 15th of January is really the one to keep in mind. And everything else that Sherlonda said holds true for us as well. Vicky, if there is time at the end, I would very much like to say a word about Mary's question about the story. I think we're in a slightly different situation about that, but I can wait until the end, just in case we have time, so we don't miss out anything else.
You know what, Michal? Why don't you jump into that? And once you wrap up with that, I'm going to go around and quickly ask you guys for concluding thoughts, 1 minute apiece. So, Michal, go for it.
Okay, all right. So sorry to labor that point, but it was such an inspiring question. I've been thinking about it since I saw it. So I think it's a little bit different for us. Maybe it's not. I don't know. You'll tell me. Because we are based in Geneva, which is the capital of international diplomacy since 1927, when the League of Nations was founded here. And, and that is basically the outlook of our school entirely. So everything that we do is with that international outlook. We don't have any programs focusing on public policy as such, because we don't have any programs focusing on the national public policy or even regional of anywhere in the world. And so students come to us because we are in the European, the same place as the European headquarters of the United Nations and all the multilateral organizations that orbit around it, and the World Health Organization and the World Trade Organization. And I mean, they get to be quite a mouthful. And all the UN organizations and the NGOs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there are hundreds of those organizations here in Geneva. DC is probably the only place that comes close in terms of the density. But again, we are probably more, Geneva, not us, but Geneva is probably more internationally facing even than, even than the US capital. And so in terms of the student's story, it would be very weird of us to expect anybody to come in already having had that experience in their lives. So, the vast majority of our students come to us with a much more local story. People might be coming from a public policy program or from a program that focuses on, that they've been groomed by a university somewhere in their undergrad, and maybe they've been working in their local government or in public service somewhere, but they're coming to us because they want to gain that new perspective that is going to be international. So we don't expect to see that very much in what they're bringing in. What we do expect is to see their readiness and curiosity and, the motivation. Why do they want to expand their viewpoint to that international perspective? So, is it that they're going to want to then build an international career and become a research consultant for the UN? Is it because they want to go back to their own country and become a consultant on local policy, bringing that international expertise with them? What is it that makes us the right place for them to come to right now as they're building their story? So we're not necessarily looking for evidence of that having happened already. The other thing that is important, I think, to understand about us is that we have two types of programs.
Michal, I'm gonna cut you off. I am sorry. I'm gonna be taskmaster, mean lady here, but I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. But Michal, if you could put your contact info in the chat for folks who may want more detail and more follow-up, that would be fantastic. And I'll start with you, Michal. 30 seconds, final words in terms of what students who are working with these coordinators need to be thinking about.
30 seconds. Gosh, I'm too much of a talker, huh? Yeah, I think basically what I just said. If you're looking for that multidisciplinary thinking about the world and the world's events and how you can make an impact on them from that multi-point of view, multi-prism perspective, then then look at our school.
Great, thanks. All right, Sherlonda, go for it.
All right, everyone. So I would say the distinguishing factor and one of the things to look for really boils down to, are you interested or are you committed? So when you really think about, hey, I'm interested in doing good in the world and I want to do some things, that is wonderful. You can work in a lot of places and write a check and send it off into the world. You can volunteer in your spare time. You can do phone campaigns. There's a lot of things that you can do if you're interested in helping change the world in a positive way. But if you're committed to changing the world in a positive way, if you really want to lean into that and look back at your life and say, look at the things that I was able to do, tried to do, worked on, then this is a path that will give you the tools to be successful in accomplishing that dream.
All right, I love it. Commitment. Oliver, we will give you the final word.
So my parting thought is actually going to be about preparation, not about the actual application process or any of those. And I would suggest, and I'm going to plug PPIA and the Junior Summer Institute, the public service weekends, that there are lots of ways and opportunities for prospective applicants to think about whether or not they may want to try this out And so those are nice ways to really begin the process while there aren't undergraduates. We have one, the Public Policy Leadership Conference. And so I would suggest promoting those as opportunities to figure out whether it's an interest or a commitment, and then use those as leveraging opportunities to then begin that journey if they decide that public policy, public affairs, public administration, or international affairs is a good fit.
Oliver, Michal, Sherlonda, thank you so much for bringing your expertise, your experience. Thank you, those of you who joined us today. Special shout out to APSIA, to Brianna, to Carmen for making this all happen. Again, you know, we are an email away. All of us, I know, I think I speak for all of us, would be happy to engage with you or your students as well. So again, thank you, mil gracias. And that's a wrap. It's always so odd to end a Zoom call. I still haven't gotten used to it. Oh, and if you could, please very quickly submit this poll and we'll let you go. Take care, y'all.